I'm Nichole Berlie. It is Friday, August 12th. This is NewsNation Rush Hour. Let's get right into that breaking news. And here it is. A judge has unsealed the search warrant for the FBI raid of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home, as well as the property receipt, which shows everything taken in that search. Our NewsNation correspondents are combing through each and every page of the documents to break them all down for you. So we'll start with NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Enton, who is live outside of Mar-a-Lago. Brian, what does the warrant say was taken?
Well, Nichole, it does not get into a lot of specifics, which is really no surprise. We expected that because a lot of the documents are allegedly classified documents, so they weren't going to spell it out in the public release. But we did get more information than we've had, and I want to read through this list of exactly what was listed as taken from Mar-a-Lago. 20 boxes, classified TSSCI documents, which stands for Top Secret Sensitive Compartmented Information, which is the highest level of secret documents. 4 sets of top secret documents, 3 sets of secret documents, 3 sets of confidential documents, photos and handwritten notes, information about the President of France, and a grant of clemency for Roger Stone. I am told, Nichole, right now, all of those items remain at the FBI office here in South Florida.
Okay, so those items remain at the FBI office there. Is the FBI alleging a crime was committed?
So it's important to point out that former President Trump has not been charged with a crime, but we know that this search warrant basically revolved around 3 areas. Number 1, removal or destruction of records. Number 2, obstruction of an investigation. And number 3, violating the Espionage Act. So those are 3 possible charges. But of course, right now, the former president is not charged with anything.
Okay, yeah, so just to reiterate, the former president not charged with anything. Has he responded?
Oh, yes, he has. He has been very, very active on his Truth Social account over the last several days, and he was on there posting shortly after this document was made public. He said, in part, number 1, it was all declassified. Number 2, they don't need to seize anything. They could have had it anytime they wanted without playing politics and breaking into Mar-a-Lago. It was in secure storage with an additional lock on as per their request. And it is interesting what he says there. We do know that the FBI was at Mar-a-Lago in June. They asked for this additional lock. There are a lot of missing puzzle pieces to this, Nichole. They were obviously in discussions. They were there in June. They saw the boxes. They asked for the lock. We still don't know exactly what led up to the search warrant.
All right, so we know, based on this, all of the items that they were looking for, do we know where they were actually found?
So this part of the information is not in the search warrant, but I am told by sources that the classified documents were found in 2 different locations within Mar-a-Lago. Number 1, the documents were in the president's office, which is in an old bridal suite above the ballroom. And number 2, other documents were found in a storage room in a hallway off of the pool area, I am told, about a 6 by 10 room, a room that had boxes all along the wall. That is another area where some of the documents were found, Nichole.
All right, Brian Enton live for us outside of Mar-a-Lago. Thank you for that. All right, let's give you a live look now at the federal courthouse. This is in West Palm Beach. Still, of course, a lot of moving parts in today's breaking development. So let's bring in NewsNation correspondent Kelly Meyer now to help us break down the actual documents. So, Kelly, you've been digging through all of these. How did we get here?
Well, Nichole, this is all a part of the investigation into whether former President Trump wrongly kept hold of the classified material and what's inside those pages. The unsealed search warrant revealing the FBI is investigating Trump for potential obstruction of justice in violation of the Espionage Act. The former president's lawyers are arguing the president declassified these documents before leaving office. And while he has the power to do so, there are federal regulations that lay out a process for doing it. The DOJ says it has asked Trump for these documents. The department says it subpoenaed him to deliver it, and he didn't. The search warrant came about after he allegedly refused to give the material back. The former president pushing back today, saying the FBI could have had the documents anytime they wanted. And we know Attorney General Merrick Garland approved the decision personally. The warrant itself was granted by a federal judge after the FBI was able to show there were reasonable grounds to search his Mar-a-Lago home. Both the AG and former President Trump called for the release of this search warrant. Nichole?
All right, so Kelly, the warrant's been released. We're all able to read that now, but what else don't we know at this point?
And that's also key here. The former president and his team don't have the affidavit, the document issued in support of the warrant that contains the most sensitive and important details explaining the cause of the investigation. The affidavit would explain the evidence used to persuade the judges there was probable cause a crime may have been committed.
The warrant is actually, it might be the best soundbite, but it's actually the least important and the least informative. The warrant is sizzle. It makes the noise, it sounds cool, it looks cool, you see the flame, but the steak, what you want to eat, what you want to cut up and chew on and digest and enjoy with a nice bottle of red is the affidavit in support of that search warrant.
So still waiting for the steak there, and we don't know, Nichole, at the lengths at which the DOJ went to get these documents from Trump. What were the conversations between the DOJ and Trump's legal team? As far as the affidavit, that could be out sooner rather than later as the calls for its release grow. Nichole?
Yeah, certainly a lot of pressure. All right, Kelly, thank you for that. All right, let's bring in now my colleague, Leland Vittert, host, of course, of On Balance here on NewsNation. All right, Leland. Reading through this search warrant here, help us put into context the new things that we learned from these documents today.
We sort of suspected that this was going to turn on the issue of classification, and we can see right now unsealed documents reveal that there were top secret documents taken. We talked to the president's former lawyer yesterday, and she kept saying, well, the president has the right to unclassify things. He unclassified all of these documents. So, in other words, saying that because the president, and she is right, has the unilateral ability to unclassify anything he feels like, he can't be charged with a crime for having classified documents. What's interesting from the search warrant, and probably the key thing that we thought was most interesting, is that it was that he is being looked at under the three laws, Title 18, U.S. Code 793, better known as the Espionage Act. So the security clearance levels don't really matter in terms of what these documents were classified as, because the Espionage Act does not require any of the documents to actually be classified in order to be a violation of the Espionage Act. Simply having documents that relate to U.S. national security and not returning them when asked qualifies as a violation.
So classified or declassified doesn't matter in this case. I want to focus on something you said there. You had the former president's, one of his attorneys on your show last night. What did she say about releasing the warrant? Because, of course, they've had a copy of it this entire time.
They have, and they said they were waiting for the Justice Department, and there was a sort of debate about decorum, if you will, which was sort of an odd answer. What's so difficult at times like this, right, is that we have two organizations, the Trump world, and the FBI, as it relates to Donald Trump, going back to 2015, who both have serious issues with telling the truth about the situation. Mr. Trump's lawyer brought up yesterday the Russia investigation. Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, who were consistently found to have engaged in misconduct as FBI agents as it related to Donald Trump and investigations of him. Crossfire Hurricane, the Steele dossier, the list goes on of misconduct by the FBI as it relates to Donald Trump. And that's a big part of his argument of these people just cannot be trusted. And on the flip side, you have President Trump, who has his own issues with the truth. So we're at an incredibly serious moment in American history and for our government and for the rule of law, without really being able to unquestionably trust what either side says.
All right, so Leland, let's talk about the contents, of this search warrant. Does it justify what some would classify as a major raid that came about because of it? And also important to note, though, there was apparently this subpoena weeks ago.
Right, as you said, apparently. So we don't know exactly what the subpoena was for and exactly whether or not documents were turned over. Clearly, the judge thought it justified it. And Kelly Meyer's report made a really excellent point, which is we don't know what is in the affidavit supporting the search warrant. And that would probably inform us all a lot more in terms of is this justified? And what I think is pretty interesting is 48 hours ago, when we were talking about this, there was universal agreement on the left and on the right that under no condition would simply violations of the Presidential Records Act, with simply having documents with no really underlying crime, investigation into corruption or investigation into January 6th or some other issue, would justify this. That simply documents in Mr. Trump's possession could in no way justify this raid. And now all of a sudden, especially people on the left, have completely forgotten that universal agreement, and now all of a sudden are into, well, the documents were very special and they were highly classified, so somehow this is some huge deal. We still are not past the point that these are documents that President Trump had as president, were under lock and key, evidently, in Mar-a-Lago, a compound guarded by the U.S. Secret Service 24 hours a day, whether or not that rises to the level of the unprecedented raiding by the FBI of a former president's office.
Yeah, I would say, certainly whichever side you are on, lots of questions that still need answers. Leland Vittert, thank you so much. And we'll let you know you can watch On Balance with Leland Vittert every weekday right after rush hour here on NewsNation at 7/6 Central. All right, let's bring in another pair of smart voices to help us understand all of this even more deeply. David Weinstein, former federal prosecutor, and Tracy Walder, former CIA officer and FBI special agent. All right, so I ask this question to both of you, David and Tracy. Based on what we now know, could we eventually see some potential criminal charges filed here? Let's start with David.
We could. He's simply proving that he has in his possession documents that were not declassified, that should not have been removed from a secure area. And the fact that he had them, that is going to potentially support one of the three charges they're looking at, which is the charge under the Espionage Act. Whether or not they can establish they've not been declassified is going to be part of the crux of what they're going to need to prove here.
All right, so Tracy, break down for us the difference here between a warrant, an affidavit, and a property receipt.
So thank you for having me again, Nichole. So with a warrant, simply what they have is something that has been issued by a judge, and they are able to go into the home and seize the items that the judge has given them permission to seize. The affidavit is going to really be that probable cause that they have gained in order to be able to receive that warrant that is given to a judge, and then the judge will sign off on the warrant. A property receipt is something that you leave when you leave whatever the place is that you have served that warrant at. And it's generally a rather general list of items that were taken. In this case, obviously, it's broad because some of those items were classified.
All right, so David, let's go over to you now. Some information we know is redacted. How do they pick and choose what is actually made public?
Well, part of what was redacted was identities of law enforcement officers who made these seizures. We heard the Attorney General talk about that yesterday. Other information, and I'm looking down at the warrant itself, signatures of people who took it. Again, that's law enforcement officers who have taken it. Aside from that, they really haven't redacted much other than case ID numbers. So the fact is, we know what, not specifically, but the general contents of those boxes. Some of them contain information that they've labeled top secret SCI, which is the highest level of security. And I'm sure Tracy can attest to that as well. And those are supposed to be kept in the SCIF or in an area that's designated as a SCIF, most likely somewhere in or near the White House, not in Mar-a-Lago. And even if there's 2 locks on the door, that's not going to cut it for the security that's required for these top secret security documents.
All right, so David says that won't cut it. Tracy, I want to go to you now. There's some reports that are pointing to a possible mole inside Mar-a-Lago. So explain for us, how does that informant process work when it comes to then reporting something?
So, yes, that's an interesting question. What I think is really going to shine a lot of light here is obviously the release of the affidavit, because then we will know how this probable cause to obtain this warrant was acquired. When I went through the released documents, and it seemed like the areas they were searching were actually a lot broader than what I thought. It basically gave them almost carte blanche to search really all of former President Trump's facilities within Mar-a-Lago. So in all honesty, that points me away from the fact that there may have been a mole, and really points me towards the fact that perhaps this was information, these documents were information that was acquired throughout the course of perhaps another investigation. And they realized that these documents may be missing. And the reason I say that, I used to sort of think that perhaps there could have been a mole. And I'm not saying that that the possibility is gone. But what I think is very interesting is to really hone in on that Title 18, Section 793 of the Espionage Act, where it's more than just the classification of the documents itself. It's also, that section talks about intent to injure or advantage foreign nations. And I think that, to me, is pointing really, with the broadness of the search warrant, to that perhaps this was information that came out of other investigations.
All right, yes, certainly. We are waiting to see, and also waiting for that affidavit, as you both mentioned. All right, David Weinstein, Tracy Walder, we thank you both for your time.
You're welcome, Nichole.
And of course, with a story like this, there are always political implications and calculations. So let's drill down on that angle. Now, let's bring in Julia Manchester, national politics reporter with our partners at The Hill. So Julie, the former president writing on Truth Social that his poll numbers have now never been higher, that Republican fundraising is breaking records. Is this part potentially of a political strategy?
I think it very much is, Nichole. In fact, you saw in the hours after the raid and the days after the raid, the former president was even fundraising off of the raid, and the Republican National Committee was also cashing in on that. So absolutely, I think this is a part of a political strategy. This is very much Donald Trump trying to make himself seem like a martyr who's representing his base. And they're saying, look, the political and government establishment in Washington is trying to get rid of me, your representative. And he's trying to galvanize his base that way. And you're also seeing it happening on Capitol Hill as well. You have House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, for example, saying that if Republicans win back the House in November, they will move to investigate Merrick Garland, the Attorney General. So politics is written all over this.
Okay, so, the former president has yet to say whether or not he will be running in 2024. But, depending upon what unfolds here, could there be a situation that would bar him from running again?
There could be a particularly legal situation where he would be barred, especially when it comes to the Presidential Records Act, or, what happened to this classified information. I'm not a legal expert, so we're not at that point yet. However, I'm sure there could be something that could happen. That said, though, I think that's going to open the door to a lot of legal challenges. You're going to see lots of legal back and forth. You're going to see a lot of, pushback to that. It's probably not going to be a popular position with President Trump's base, and even maybe some people outside of President Trump's base. So, we'll have to see where it goes. But right now, we're not at that point yet.
All right, Julia Manchester from our partners at The Hill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, also today, NewsNation gathering some new information about the Ohio man killed after investigators say he attacked the FBI field office in Cincinnati. We're also learning about an alert sent to federal departments and agencies after the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. So let's bring in NewsNation correspondent Evan Lambert live for us in Washington. Evan, what exactly did that memo say?
Nichole, the memo that NewsNation has obtained warns that after the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago, online threats have increased, and some are calling specifically for FBI agents to be targeted. Hours after a veteran armed with an AR-15 style rifle tried breaking into an FBI field office in Ohio and died in a shootout with FBI agents and other law enforcement, we're getting a look at how federal law enforcement are reacting to this threat environment. NewsNation obtained an unclassified law enforcement internal memo, which warns federal officers that more violence could be coming. The document says users in far-right, anti-government, and conspiracy theory message boards have advocated for violence against FBI agents and other federal employees. Some have claimed that a civil war was imminent. It goes on to say, online narratives and conspiracy theories related to the execution of a federal search warrant at the Florida residence of former President Trump could motivate further acts of violence against federal law enforcement personnel. Investigators haven't revealed a motive in the Ohio attack. Social media accounts in the name of the suspected shooter, 42-year-old Ricky Schiffer, were home to troubling and violent posts. They include calls to kill federal agents, false references to a stolen election, and even a post claiming Schiffer was at the Capitol on the day of the January 6th riot. NewsNation has not independently verified these accounts belong to the suspect. FBI Director Christopher Wray in recent days condemning threats to federal law enforcement and defending his employees.
And any threats made against law enforcement, including the men and women of the FBI, as with any law enforcement agency, are deplorable and dangerous.
And Nichole, sources tell NewsNation the FBI has not specifically beefed up security at offices in response to these threats. Nichole?
All right, Evan Lambert live for us in Washington. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.